The words hit me like a physical blow. Brittany, we've decided to go in a different direction. Gloria's voice was clinical, emotionless, as she slid the termination letter across the polished conference table. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the paper, the letterhead of Meridian Corporate Solutions swimming before my eyes. After 6 years of pouring my heart into this company, after creating something that had revolutionized our entire training department, this was how it ended. I stared at Gloria's perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the mahogany table, her diamond wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. She wouldn't even look me in the eye. Behind her, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 20th floor, the city sprawled endlessly, indifferent to the earthquake happening in this sterile conference room. I don't understand, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. The program has been incredibly successful. Sales are up 40% across all divisions that have implemented it. The client feedback has been... Yes, well, Gloria interrupted, finally meeting my gaze with those cold gray eyes. That's exactly why we've decided to take this in-house. We appreciate your contribution, but we need someone with more corporate leadership experience to oversee the global rollout. Corporate leadership experience. The phrase tasted bitter in my mouth. I'd spent the last 2 years developing every module, every video, every interactive exercise that made up our revolutionary sales training program. I'd worked 18-hour days, sacrificed weekends, missed my sister's wedding shower because I was perfecting the role-play scenarios that had become the program's signature element. You promised me profit sharing, I said quietly, my hands folded in my lap to stop their shaking. When you approved the development budget, you said I'd receive 15% of any revenue generated by the program. Gloria's laugh was sharp, dismissive. Brittany, surely you understand that was conditional on your continued employment. These things change. Business evolves. She leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking softly. Honestly, I think you'll find this is actually beneficial for your career. Sometimes we get too attached to our projects. It's time for you to explore new opportunities. The audacity of it took my breath away. She was sitting there, in her designer suit, dismissing 2 years of my life's work as if it were a high school science project. As if the countless nights I'd spent researching cognitive learning theory, behavioral psychology, and adult education principles meant nothing. As if the innovation that had transformed our company's training effectiveness was just some happy accident. The transition will be seamless, Gloria continued, sliding another document toward me. We've already hired Marcus Denton to lead the global training initiative. You might remember him from the corporate restructuring last year. He has an MBA from Wharton. Of course he did. Marcus Denton, with his slicked-back hair and his tendency to use buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift in every conversation. Marcus, who had never developed a training program in his life, who couldn't facilitate a meeting without checking his phone every 5 minutes. Marcus, who would undoubtedly take full credit for my work while collecting a salary that was probably double what they'd been paying me. Your final day is today, Gloria said, her tone indicating the meeting was over. HR will handle the paperwork. Security will escort you out. She stood, smoothing down her skirt. I do hope you understand. This is nothing personal. It's simply business. Nothing personal. As if my career, my passion, my financial security were just line items on a spreadsheet. I sat there for a moment after she left, staring at the termination letter. My name looked strange in the formal language. Brittany Chen, Employee ID 4472, Position, Senior Training Specialist. 6 years reduced to a number and a title that didn't even capture what I actually did. The security guard appeared in the doorway, a kind-faced older man who looked almost apologetic. Ms. Chen? I'm sorry, but I need to escort you to collect your belongings. The walk to my desk felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life implode. My colleagues looked up as I passed, some offering sympathetic smiles, others quickly averting their eyes. The office buzz continued around me, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room. Life went on, indifferent to my personal catastrophe. My desk looked smaller than I remembered, cluttered with the remnants of a life I was apparently no longer living. The framed photo of me receiving the Innovation Award last year. The coffee mug my team had given me that read, World's Best Trainer. The potted succulent that had somehow survived my irregular watering schedule. As I packed my cardboard box, my hands moving automatically, my mind began to clear. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder, more focused. I thought about the countless hours I'd spent perfecting the training modules. The late nights in my home office, surrounded by research papers and empty takeout containers. The moment of breakthrough when I'd finally cracked the code on making sales training actually engaging. And then I remembered something that made me pause. A box of office supplies halfway to my cardboard container. Bright Spark Learning Solutions, LLC. My own limited liability company, registered 18 months ago on the advice of my accountant brother. Always protect your intellectual property, Brit, he'd said over dinner one evening. Especially if you're creating something at work that could have broader applications. I'd registered the copyright for every single training manual, every video script, every assessment tool, and every interactive module under Bright Spark Learning Solutions. Not under my name. Not under Meridian Corporate Solutions. Under my own company. It had seemed like such a small precaution at the time, almost paranoid. But sitting there in my soon-to-be former office, watching my colleagues pretend not to stare, I realized it might be the smartest thing I'd ever done. The security guard cleared his throat gently. "Ready, Miss Chen?" "Actually," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice, "I think I am." The elevator ride down felt different than it had that morning. This morning, I'd been Brittany Chen, Senior Training Specialist, worried about the quarterly review presentation and whether the new hire in accounting would work out. Now I was something else entirely. Someone with options. Someone with power that Gloria didn't even know existed. My phone started buzzing before I even reached the parking garage. The first call was from Jake Martinez in the Seattle office. I let it go to voicemail. Then Sarah Kim from our Dallas branch. Voicemail. Then, surprisingly, Marcus Denton himself. I sat in my Honda Civic, the cardboard box on the passenger seat, and listened to the messages. Jake's voice was tight with panic. "Brittany, what the hell happened? Gloria just sent out an email saying you're no longer with the company, and we have the Morrison Industries presentation next week. That's a $12 million client, and they specifically requested our new training methodology. Call me back. Please." Sarah was more diplomatic but equally concerned. "Hi, Brittany. I just heard the news and I'm confused. We're supposed to start the program Rollout in Dallas next month, and I don't have half the materials I need. Can we talk?" But Marcus Denton's message was the most revealing. "Brittany, hi, it's Marcus. Look, I know this is awkward, but Gloria has asked me to take over your project. I was hoping we could chat about the transition. I'm going to need access to all your files, your video scripts, the assessment protocols. Maybe we could meet for coffee? This week is pretty urgent because..." The message cut off. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Emergency meeting about Morrison deal. Gloria's freaking out. Where are all the presentation materials?" Another text, this one from Sarah. "Client wants to see training demo tomorrow. Don't have access to your modules. Help." I turned off my phone and drove home. My apartment had never felt so quiet. I made a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the courtyard where my neighbor's kids were playing on the swing set. Normal life. Continuing its normal rhythm. But my life wasn't normal anymore. And maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder labeled Bright Spark, Copyrights. Every document was there, meticulously organized. The copyright registrations for the Meridian Method, Revolutionary Sales Training. The timestamps showing I'd filed them 6 months before ever presenting the program to the company. The legal documentation that proved, beyond any doubt, that I owned every word, every concept, every innovative approach that had made Meridian's training program so successful. My phone was buzzing again, even though it was still turned off. The vibration was coming from my work laptop, which I'd forgotten was still connected to the company's messaging system. Notification after notification popped up on the screen. "Where are the training videos?" Marcus Denton. "Need access to assessment database ASAP. Gloria Harrison. Morrison client wants materials tonight. Jake Martinez. Dallas rollout in jeopardy without protocols. Sarah Kim." I closed the laptop and called my brother David. "Britt." His voice was warm, concerned. "How'd the presentation go? Did they approve the expansion budget?" "David," I said, "I need you to help me understand something about intellectual property law." There was a pause. Okay. What happened? I told him everything. The firing, the profit-sharing betrayal, Gloria's casual dismissal of my work, Marcus Denton's upcoming promotion. David listened without interrupting, and I could practically hear his lawyer brain processing the information. Britt, he said finally, please tell me you registered the copyrights under Bright Spark. Every single piece of material, I confirmed. And they're using your copyrighted content to train their employees and generate revenue? They're planning a global rollout. Hundreds of thousands of employees. Jake mentioned a $12 million client presentation using our new training methodology. David was quiet for a long moment. Brittany, do you understand what you're sitting on? I'm starting to. This isn't just copyright infringement. This is massive commercial copyright infringement. They're using your intellectual property to generate millions in revenue without permission or compensation. The statutory damages alone could be. He stopped himself. We need to be strategic about this. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, reading every document in my Bright Spark folder, cross-referencing them with the contracts I'd signed with Meridian. The employment agreement was clear. Anything I developed using company time or resources belonged to the company. But the training program hadn't been developed on company time. Not really. I'd done the bulk of the creative work at home, on weekends, using my own research and my own insights. The company had provided implementation support, sure, but the intellectual foundation was mine. And more importantly, I'd been smart enough to copyright it before I ever presented it to them. At 3 a.m, my phone rang. Unknown number. Brittany. It was Gloria, and she sounded different. Less controlled. I hope I'm not waking you. I know it's late, but we have a situation. I let the silence stretch out. The Morrison Industries presentation is tomorrow, Gloria continued, her voice tight. They're expecting to see the new training methodology. We need those materials. I see. Look, I know today was abrupt. Maybe we moved too quickly. Maybe there's a way we can work something out. Something out. The phrase was so vague, so carefully non-committal. Classic Gloria. What did you have in mind? I asked. Well, perhaps we could bring you back as a consultant. Short-term contract. Just to help with the transition. We could discuss compensation. I almost laughed. 12 hours ago, she'd had me escorted out by security. Now she was offering me consulting work. I'll need to think about it, I said. Brittany, the presentation is in 16 hours. We really need an answer tonight. I said I'll think about it, Gloria. I hung up. My phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. The next morning, I called David first thing. I want to do this right, I told him. I want to be professional about it. But I also want them to understand that they can't just steal my work and expect me to be grateful for the opportunity to help them do it. David had already been researching. I've been looking at comparable cases all night. Britt, this could be huge. But you're right. We need to be strategic. What are you thinking? I want to go back. But not as an employee. Not as someone they can push around. I want to go back as the owner of something they desperately need. By noon, I had a plan. I called Gloria back. She answered before the first ring finished. Brittany, thank God. The Morrison presentation is in 4 hours and... I'll help, I said. But not as an employee. I'll come back as an independent contractor representing Bright Spark Learning Solutions. Bright Spark? What's that? My company. The company that owns the copyright to the training methodology you want to use. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, what? The training program. Gloria. Every manual, every video, every assessment. It's all copyrighted under my LLC. Has been for over a year. That's not possible. You developed that program as our employee. Actually, I developed it as an independent researcher and then licensed it to Meridian for internal use. But that license was contingent on my continued employment and the profit-sharing agreement we discussed. Since you've terminated my employment and voided our agreement, the license has expired. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. Brittany, Gloria said finally, her voice very careful, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to use my training methodology for the Morrison presentation, or for any other purpose, you'll need to negotiate a new licensing agreement with Bright Spark Learning Solutions. This is ridiculous. You can't just... Gloria, the presentation is in 4 hours. We can discuss the legal details later. Right now, do you want my help or not? Another pause. What are your terms? I'll handle the Morrison presentation personally. In exchange, Meridian pays Bright Spark Learning Solutions a consulting fee of $50,000 and agrees to negotiate in good faith for an ongoing licensing agreement. $50,000? That's absurd. The Morrison deal is worth $12 million, Jake mentioned. Seems like a reasonable investment to me. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Fine, she said finally. But this doesn't set any precedent for future arrangements. Of course not. Future arrangements will be much more expensive. I walked back into the Meridian building at 2 p.m., not as a terminated employee but as the CEO of Bright Spark Learning Solutions. The security guard who'd escorted me out the day before nodded politely as I signed in at the visitor's desk. I wore my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for the Innovation Award ceremony, and carried my laptop bag with confidence I hadn't felt in years. Jake Martinez met me at the elevator, relief written across his face. Brittany, you have no idea how glad I am to see you. We've been scrambling all morning. Marcus tried to run through the presentation, but... He shook his head. It was a disaster. He kept talking about leveraging synergies and optimizing human capital ROI. I think the Morrison executives were about to walk out. Where are they now? Conference room C. Gloria's trying to buy time with the company overview presentation. But they want to see the training methodology. That's why they're here. The Morrison Industries executives looked exactly like I'd expected. 3 middle-aged men in expensive suits who'd probably sat through 1,000 sales pitches. They looked politely bored as Gloria clicked through slides about Meridian's corporate history. Ah, perfect timing, Gloria said as I entered, her smile so bright it could have powered the building. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Brittany Chen, the developer of our revolutionary training methodology. Actually, I said, setting up my laptop, I'm here representing Bright Spark Learning Solutions, the company that developed the methodology Meridian has licensed. One of the executives, a silver-haired man whose nameplate read Robert Morrison III, looked intrigued. Licensed? I thought this was Meridian's proprietary system. The methodology was developed by Bright Spark, I explained, connecting my laptop to the projector. Meridian is one of our implementation partners. I could feel Gloria's eyes boring into the back of my head, but I ignored her. This was my moment. What followed was the presentation of my life. Not because the material was different. It was the same training methodology I'd been perfecting for 2 years. But because for the first time I was presenting it as its creator, its owner, its architect. Not as some employee hoping for approval, but as an expert sharing her expertise. I walked them through the psychological foundations of the approach, the research that had informed each module, the metrics that proved its effectiveness. I demonstrated the interactive elements, showed them video testimonials from other clients, and broke down the ROI calculations that proved the program paid for itself within 6 months. Robert Morrison III leaned forward as I finished. Ms. Chen, this is impressive work. Very impressive. But I have to ask, if Bright Spark developed this methodology, why are we contracting with Meridian? Bright Spark specializes in development and innovation, I said smoothly. We partner with implementation firms like Meridian to deliver the training to large corporate clients. It allows us to focus on what we do best, creating cutting-edge learning solutions. And Meridian has licensed this exclusively? I glanced at Gloria, whose face had gone very pale. That's actually still being negotiated. The meeting ended with handshakes all around and a promise from Morrison Industries to move forward with the contract. As the executives filed out, Robert Morrison III handed me his business card. Ms. Chen, I'd be interested in discussing other applications for your methodology. We have operations in 15 countries. Perhaps Bright Spark and Morrison could work together directly on future projects. I'd be very interested in that conversation, I said, pocketing the card. After the Morrison executives left, Gloria asked me to stay behind. That was well done, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Very professional. Thank you. But Brittany, We need to clarify some things. This bright spark situation. It's complicated. It doesn't have to be. Gloria sat down across from me, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely uncertain. What do you want? It was a good question. What did I want? Yesterday, I would have said I wanted my job back, my profit-sharing agreement honored, an apology for the way I'd been treated. But sitting in that conference room, having just presented my work as the CEO of my own company rather than as someone else's employee, I realized my wants had evolved. I want Bright Spark to be Meridian's exclusive partner for all training and development initiatives, I said. I want a 5-year licensing agreement with guaranteed minimums. I want equity participation in any revenue generated by Bright Spark methodologies. And I want Marcus Denton's job. Gloria blinked. Marcus's job? Director of Training and Development. I created this methodology, Gloria. I should be the one overseeing its implementation. Brittany, you have to understand, Marcus has an MBA. He has corporate leadership experience. Marcus couldn't run that presentation this morning. Marcus doesn't understand the first thing about adult learning theory or behavioral psychology. Marcus is a placeholder. I leaned forward. You fired me because you thought you could steal my work and hire someone cheaper to implement it. But here's the thing. You can't separate the methodology from the person who created it. This isn't just a training program, Gloria. It's a philosophy, an approach, a way of thinking about human potential. Marcus can't teach that because Marcus doesn't understand it. That afternoon, I signed a consulting agreement that paid Bright Spark Learning Solutions more money than I'd made in my previous 2 years at Meridian combined. It was just the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked with Meridian's legal team to structure a licensing agreement that gave Bright Spark exclusive rights to all training methodology development while allowing Meridian to implement and market the solutions. I moved back into my old office, but with a new title. Director of Innovation and Strategic Learning Partnerships. Marcus Denton was reassigned to special projects, which everyone understood to be corporate purgatory. But Gloria wasn't finished with me. The first sign of trouble came during my second week back. I arrived at my office to find that several files had been moved on my computer. Small things, documents saved in different folders, timestamps that didn't match my memory. When I asked our IT department about it, they claimed there had been a system update that might have reorganized some files. Then I started noticing inconsistencies in email threads. Messages I'd sent appeared to have different wording than what I remembered writing. A proposal I'd submitted to the leadership team somehow contained recommendations I'd never made. When I brought it up with Jake Martinez, he showed me his copy of the email, which clearly contained language I hadn't written. That's weird, Jake said, frowning at his screen. This doesn't sound like you at all. Leveraging synergistic paradigm shifts? You hate corporate buzzwords. I did hate corporate buzzwords. I'd never written those words in my life. It took me 3 more incidents to realize what was happening. Someone was editing my work, altering my communications, making me look less competent and professional. The changes were subtle, a buzzword here, a grammatical error there, a recommendation that didn't quite make sense. But they were consistent. The breakthrough came when I found a draft email in my sent folder that I hadn't written at all. It was addressed to our biggest client, Morrison Industries, and it contained several technical errors about our training methodology. Errors that made it look like I didn't understand my own program. I hadn't sent that email. But according to the system, it had come from my account. That night, I called David. Someone's trying to sabotage my reputation, I told him. They're altering my work, my emails, my files. They're trying to make me look incompetent. Can you prove it? Not yet. But I will. David was quiet for a moment. Britt, be careful. If someone's willing to go this far, they're not going to stop just because you're on to them. He was right. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find an email from HR requesting a meeting to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your recent work product. The HR meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. I spent the morning setting up a solution David had suggested. Keystroke logging software on my own computer, configured to track every change made to my files and every email sent from my account. If someone was accessing my work remotely, I'd have a record of it. The HR meeting was led by Patricia Williams, a woman I'd always respected for her fairness and professionalism. She looked uncomfortable as she opened a folder on the conference table. Brittany, we've received some concerns about your recent communications with clients. Specifically, there have been reports of unprofessional language and technical inaccuracies in your emails. She slid several printed emails across the table. They all bore my name and email signature, but the language was wrong, sloppy, filled with mistakes I would never make. Patricia, I said carefully, I didn't write these emails. I'm sorry. Someone has been accessing my computer and altering my work. These emails may have been sent from my account, but I didn't write them. Patricia looked genuinely confused. Brittany, that's a very serious accusation. Are you saying someone hacked your computer? I'm saying someone with administrative access has been deliberately sabotaging my work to make me look incompetent. Do you have any proof of this? I will soon. The proof came 2 days later. My keystroke logging software caught someone accessing my computer remotely at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night. The session lasted 43 minutes, during which time several emails were altered and one completely new email was composed and sent to a client in Australia. The IP address traced back to a computer in the Meridian building. Specifically, to Gloria's office. But I needed more than just an IP address. I needed to catch her in the act. I started staying late at the office, pretending to work on new training modules while actually monitoring my computer's activity. On Friday night I got lucky. At 10:23 p.m., someone accessed my computer remotely. I watched in real time as they opened an email I'd sent to the Morrison Industries team, deleted 2 paragraphs of analysis, and replaced them with generic corporate speak that made me sound like I'd gotten my business training from a fortune cookie. I took screenshots of every change. Then I called building security. This is Brittany Chen in training and development. I think someone may be in the building illegally. Could you check if anyone's logged into the system from Gloria Harrison's office? The security guard confirmed that Gloria's keycard had been used to access the building at 9:45 p.m. She was still in the building. I walked down to Gloria's office. The lights were on, and I could see her silhouette through the frosted glass door. She was sitting at her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. I knocked. Gloria's head snapped up, and for a moment, I saw pure panic in her eyes before she managed to compose herself. Brittany, she said, opening the door. Working late. Apparently we both are, I said. What are you working on? Oh, just catching up on some reports. You know how it is. I nodded toward her computer screen, which was still displaying what looked like an email interface. Anything I can help with? No, it's fine. Actually, I was just finishing up. She moved to close her laptop, but not before I caught a glimpse of what was on the screen. It was my email account. Gloria, I said quietly, we need to talk. What followed was the most uncomfortable conversation of my professional life. Gloria tried to deny it at first, then claimed she was just quality checking my communications, then finally broke down and admitted she'd been trying to undermine my credibility. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she said, tears actually forming in her eyes. The board is asking questions about why we needed to bring you back at such a high salary. They're questioning my decision to terminate you in the first place. If you succeed too dramatically, it makes me look incompetent. So you decided to make me actually incompetent instead? I thought if your work quality declined, they'd see that bringing you back was a mistake. Then we could renegotiate your contract terms. It was breathtakingly stupid and breathtakingly petty at the same time. Gloria, you do realize this is illegal, right? Unauthorized access to my computer, altering company communications, fraud. Her face went white. Brittany, please. This doesn't have to become a legal matter. We can work this out. But it was too late for working things out. I'd already forwarded all my evidence to David, to Patricia in HR, and to Robert Morrison III, who deserved to know that someone had been sending fraudulent emails under my name to his company. The Monday morning meeting was held in the largest conference room on the executive floor. Present were myself, Gloria, Patricia from HR, David representing me as legal counsel, and 3 members of Meridian's board of directors, including CEO Jennifer Walsh, whom I'd never met but whose reputation for no-nonsense leadership was legendary. Jennifer Walsh was a small woman with silver hair and steel in her voice. She opened the meeting by placing a thick folder on the table. Ms. Harrison, we've reviewed the evidence provided by Ms. Chen's counsel. The keystroke logs, the IP traces, the security footage showing you entering the building after hours, and the screenshots documenting the alteration of company communications. She opened the folder. Would you like to explain this behavior? Gloria had clearly been hoping this could be handled quietly. The presence of the board members seemed to deflate her completely. I made some poor decisions. I was concerned about the transition, about making sure the quality of communications met our standards. Ms. Harrison, Jennifer Walsh interrupted, you accessed an employee's computer without authorization, altered official company communications, and sent fraudulent emails to clients. This isn't about communication standards. This is about criminal behavior. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Ms. Chen, Jennifer continued, turning to me, I want to personally apologize for what you've experienced. This behavior is completely contrary to Meridian's values and standards. Ms. Harrison's employment is terminated effective immediately. Gloria looked like she might faint. Furthermore, Jennifer continued, we'd like to offer you Ms. Harrison's position as Vice President of Training and Development, along with a formal partnership agreement between Meridian and Bright Spark Learning Solutions. It took a moment for her words to sink in. The board has reviewed your work over the past month, Jennifer explained. Your training methodology has exceeded every performance metric we have. The Morrison Industries contract alone is worth $18 million over 3 years. We want Bright Spark to be our exclusive partner for all training and development initiatives globally. She slid another document across the table. This partnership agreement includes equity participation, guaranteed minimum licensing fees, and a 5-year renewable contract. We're also prepared to offer you a significant signing bonus as an apology for the treatment you received. I looked at the numbers on the contract. The signing bonus alone was more than my entire previous annual salary. There is one condition, Jennifer added. We want you to develop a comprehensive anti-workplace harassment training program. What happened to you should never happen to another Meridian employee. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, Gloria's old office, actually, which had been completely redecorated, reviewing the quarterly reports for Bright Spark Learning Solutions. The numbers were almost impossible to believe. The partnership with Meridian had led to contracts with 12 other Fortune 500 companies. The anti-workplace harassment program I'd developed was being implemented across 200,000 employees worldwide. Morrison Industries had signed an exclusive 3-year extension and hired Bright Spark to develop leadership training for their international operations. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Saw the Forbes article about Bright Spark being named one of the top workplace training companies. Mom's going to frame it. The Forbes article. I still couldn't believe that had happened. From termination to triumph. How one woman turned workplace betrayal into $1 million business. The journalist had wanted to focus on the drama, the betrayal, the comeback story. But what struck me most about seeing my story in print was how different the ending was from what I'd imagined 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I'd thought justice would look like getting my job back, maybe getting an apology, possibly even getting Gloria fired. I'd thought vindication meant returning to the status quo, but with acknowledgement that I'd been wronged. I never imagined it would mean owning a company that was revolutionizing corporate training. I never imagined it would mean having equity stakes in Fortune 500 companies. I never imagined it would mean being invited to speak at conferences about innovation and intellectual property protection. Most of all, I never imagined it would feel so peaceful. There had been a period, right after Gloria's sabotage attempts, when I'd been consumed by anger. I'd wanted her to suffer. I'd wanted her to experience the humiliation and professional devastation she'd tried to inflict on me. When she was terminated, I'd felt a surge of satisfaction that scared me a little with its intensity. But that feeling had faded quickly. What replaced it wasn't triumph over an enemy defeated, but something much more valuable. The deep satisfaction of work that mattered, of a business built on genuine value rather than corporate politics, of relationships based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical power games. Gloria had tried to destroy my reputation and steal my work because she saw success as a zero-sum game. My success, in her mind, meant her failure. My competence highlighted her inadequacy. My innovation made her look obsolete. But the real victory wasn't proving her wrong. The real victory was building something so much bigger than her small-minded view of professional relationships. Bright Spark wasn't successful because it had defeated Meridian or because it had embarrassed Gloria. It was successful because it solved real problems for real people in ways that created genuine value. The anti-workplace harassment training program was probably the work I was most proud of. Not because it was the most profitable, though it was, but because of the emails I received from employees who said it had changed their workplace culture, from managers who said it had given them tools to address problems they'd previously ignored, from companies who reported significant improvements in employee satisfaction and retention. That was the real vindication. Not revenge against someone who had wronged me, but the knowledge that my work was making workplaces better, fairer, more humane.